Aloha. Welcome to Abe Lee Seminars Sessions. This chapter is going to be a little confusing because if you've never had experience in learning about legal descriptions, this will be like Greek to you. Bear with me, and you may have to watch this video a few times. So in this chapter, we're going to talk about land description, legal description. And you go, what is that? Well, every parcel of land that is sold has to be legally described so that someone else buying that property will know what they're buying. And so how do they determine how to describe that property? Well, back in the old days, they just said it's from that mountain at the North Fork to this river and so forth, because they didn't have GPS. They didn't have longitude and latitudes. So it's very crude in the way they described it. Then engineers and surveyors came along and said, I think we can pinpoint where this property is. Not exactly, because they didn't have internet. They didn't have GPS. But still, they were able to legally describe a piece of property in some way to actually show you where that property is located. So we call this legal description. So every parcel of land that becomes part of a sale, a lease, security for a mortgage, it has to be properly identified and described. And they're described as legal descriptions. And they're based originally on the field notes of a surveyor or civil engineer. And so there are lots of descriptions that we call legal, and here's some of the names that they have. It's called land court map number, lot number, certificate of title number, lot, block, and subdivision, plat and parcel, file plan, meets and bounds, government survey. Oh my goodness, why don't they have just one name for this thing? But that's how it goes. And they have other descriptions sufficient for a listing contract or for a lease as we described in previous videos, where you have the address, suite number, or apartment number, or a description of the office building and the suite number versus an apartment number. All right, so you do have things of that nature. So you have tax map key, which I'll talk about, or street address, which are actually much more useful for us as laymen. But for the legalese people, they need to have a legal description based on the field notes of a surveyor or engineer. In the old days, if you can imagine, King Kamehameha gave the land to the Kanakas. And he owned all the land. When he conquered all the islands, he was a king. He owned all the land. Then some people convinced the king that maybe you should give some land to the Kanakas because they work for you. But when they die, they have no land to give to their children. And so the king was convinced that maybe he should give some land to the people. Hence, they had to figure out, how do you describe the land that you're giving or selling? Okay, so in the very beginning, they had a deed written by somebody with beautiful penmanship and said, King Kamehameha, the grantor, is giving to Kavika, the grantee. And then they describe the land. And they say it's an Ahupua'a Punalu. Okay, and then they try to describe the piece of land with what they call monuments, like a tree or a rock or a stream or whatever it happens to be. Diamond Head is a good example of a monument because Diamond Head is famous. So they'll use those kinds of descriptions in the very beginning in the deed. So the deed then was a document that transferred title from the grantor, in this case Kamehameha, to Kavika, the grantee, right? So they called it the regular system. And they would then talk about grantor-grantee index. And they had these big books that showed on what date, which island, which part of the island Kamehameha or Kavika gave the property to Kane or whoever it happened to be. So that was a regular system of keeping track of how the property was transferred from one grantor to the grantee. And then they had ways to describe the numbers or the properties. And they had what they call a book and page number with a grantor-grantee index. And then they had a digital system where they had the 2 digits for the year, like 16 would be 2016, or I guess it could be 1816 or whatever, okay? And then they would have a numbering system. Then there's a fellow named Robert Torrens from Australia. He came along and convinced the territorial government of Hawaii that he had a system called the land court system that was much better and more effective and more sure of the title to the property that you're transferring. So in Hawaii has 2 systems called the regular system, and then they have the land court system. And we don't have enough time to go into the details of this thing, but just know that there's land court and regular system. I'm going to read a description of a land court description. Okay? All of that certain parcel of land situated at Waipio, District of Ewa, City and County of Honolulu, State of Hawaii, described as follows. Lot 170, area 5,414 square feet, as shown on map 25, filed in the office of the Assistant Registrar of the Land Court of the State of Hawaii with Land Court Consolidation number 58, being all of the land subject described in Transfer Certificate Title number 141416, issued to the grantors herein, subject, however, to any encumbrances mentioned in said Transfer Certificate of Title number 141416. You go, oh, that's a land court description, legal description. You go, that means nothing to me. So let's see what a regular system sounds like. A typical description of a regular system would be all of that certain parcel of land being portions of the land described in and covered by Land Patent Grant number 2238 to the District of Ko-Lauloa, City and County of Honolulu, State of Hawaii, being lot number 13 of the tract of land known as Mauka Makai Estates, as shown on the map thereof, filed in the office of the Registrar of Conveyances at Honolulu as registered map number 175, containing an area of 8,900 square feet or thereabouts, and being the same parcel of land that was conveyed to the said grantor by deed of Palau Pahoapua, wife of Lopakapua, dated June 1, 1998, and recorded in the said office of the Registrar of Conveyances in LIBRA 1744 on pages 188 to 190. All right? So you go, what the heck does this mean? So when you look at and read the legal descriptions for land court and regular system, they're gibberish to us. But to the legalese, to surveyors, to engineers, it makes sense. All right? For us, it's give me the address. All right? And give me the tax map key number. They used to identify these boundaries with what they call monuments or markers. And so the monuments would be natural to the surroundings. As I mentioned to you, Diamond Head is a landmark or monument. All right. Then if they have elevations from in relation to the ocean is at 0 sea level, 0 elevation height. But if you're at Tantalus, it might be 500 feet above sea level. So the benchmark is a monument that gives you the elevation. All right. So again, for all of you that are reading or watching this thing, you go, I don't get it. Don't worry about it. Okay. People that are in the know with the surveyors, engineers, attorneys, and title people, they know what to do. That's what we call the description of land court and regular system. Then they have this thing called meets and bounds and azimuths, measure clockwise from true north. And then they have what we call degrees, feet, minutes, and seconds, and all this other stuff. I have no idea what that means. Thank goodness we have smart people that know how to make these legal descriptions. So hopefully you get a little better idea of what a land court sounds like and what a regular system sounds like in the legal description. And really, you don't have to know much more than that. For us as practitioners of real estate, all we need is an address and a tax map key, and we're going to cover tax map keys later. Aloha.